Welcome to Budgie Keat Gaming. I'm your host, Finley. Today is the first day of autumn, which means we are getting very close to spooky season. And you know what goes with spooky season? Yup, that's right, spooky games. And today I'll be reviewing both psychological horror games from the Vlad Circus series. I'd like to thank Blowfish Studios and Indiesruption for the Vlad Circus Curse of Asmodeus review code. I originally planned on only reviewing Curse of Asmodeus when I received the code. It turns out I enjoyed that game quite a bit and wanted to know more about the story. So I bought the first game, Vlad Circus, Descend into Madness, to play right after I beat the second game. Based on what I just said and the title of this video, I think it's pretty obvious that I enjoyed both games very much and would go as far to say that this is easily the best horror series we got in years. Both games offer an intriguing storyline, gorgeous pixel art graphics, and creepy imagery that is sure to delight horror fans. Vlad Circus, Curse of Asmodeus, the prequel to the series, unfolds in parallel timelines. Parts of the game takes place in what is supposed to be the current timeline, where our protagonist Joseph Petrescu wakes up in an abandoned building severely burned, with no voice and no memory on how he received his injuries, or how he wound up in the hellscape that appears to be one part insane asylum and another part torture prison. The other half of the game plays out in the not-so-distant past, just days before the current timeline, eventually leading up to the current timeline. Here, you will solve puzzles and build relationships with townspeople to find out exactly how Joseph got into the horrible predicament he finds himself in, while also trying to get in his brother's good graces so Joseph can get his job back at the Vlad Circus. In the current timeline, you have to solve puzzles, fight off rats, and avoid environmental hazards to make your way through the horrors within the asylum. Since this game has minimal combat, you'll be spending a good chunk of your time solving puzzles so you can progress the story. The gameplay loop is basically solving puzzles in the current timeline to progress through the asylum to reach mirrors. You use mirrors to enter the past, which isn't nearly as puzzle-focused, but based more around character and relationship building. Luckily, for the most part, the puzzles are enjoyable. There were definitely a few that were annoying, but if you get stuck, there are plenty of guides online, which is surprising considering the game is only a month old. And honestly, the story and characters is where this game truly shines. So if you have to look up a puzzle, you're not doing a disservice to yourself by not figuring it out yourself. I remember one part that really annoyed me was the chase sequence in town. After spending a good 30 minutes on it, I gave up, went online to figure out how to progress, and moved on. Without spoiling anything, the most disturbing part about this game is how grounded in reality it is. With the exception of some magical potion, there are no supernatural elements in this game. Everything that happens, at least the most horrific parts, could possibly happen in real life, which makes it all the more disturbing and terrifying. Surprisingly enough, this game does not rely on jump scares, but more so on a slow burn creepy story that gets more disturbing the farther you go. While this is a horror game, I would say that isn't so much scary as it is disturbing. The cool thing with this series is you can start with whichever game you want. So whichever game you start with, there'll be no confusion. Now, if I had to choose which to play first between the two, I'd go with Curse of Asmodeus, and I'd do this for a couple of reasons. The first is because of the gameplay. While both games offer gameplay that ranges from serviceable to excellent, Curse of Asmodeus is far more simple and stripped down when compared to the first game, Descend into Madness. I don't look at this as a negative because the gameplay choices make sense for what the developers were doing with the game, but I think it could feel a bit too simple if you go into this game after playing Descend into Madness. Another reason is because of the way the story plays out in both games. If you play Curse of Asmodeus first, you won't be spoiling much of the story in Descend into Madness. But if you play Descend into Madness first, you'll ruin the oh shit moment that plays out towards the end of Curse of Asmodeus. Now, the original game of the series that was released 3 years ago, Vlad Circus, Descend into Madness, follows the protagonist Ollie the Clown, who used to perform for Vlad Circus before it burnt down. The circus has been on hiatus for years, so the owner, Vlad, invites the old crew to his mansion to talk about reviving the circus. But of course the mansion is creepy. Mysterious things start happening, and it's your job to figure out what is going on. Now, this game plays very similar to Curse of Asmodeus, especially with the heavy emphasis on puzzle solving, but it is also quite different. For starters, this game relies more on jump scares and supernatural elements. In the second half of the game, there is a decent amount of combat. Another thing that is drastically different between the games is the setting. Curse of Asmodeus has many locations, such as a western desert, a bustling yet grungy town with multiple shops and buildings to visit, along with an asylum. Descend into Madness takes place in a huge mansion with a forest surrounding said mansion. Honestly, between the big creepy mansion, the creepy woods surrounding the mansion, the awkward yet fun gunplay, the monsters and the amount of puzzles in this game reminds me a lot of the original Resident Evil game. The horror in both games feels different as well. Curse of Asmodeus relies on being disturbing using violent imagery and staying grounded in reality. Descend into Madness relies on being creepy with its supernatural elements, and my god, it sure does it well. I didn't really think pixel art games could be very creepy, but this game definitely proved me wrong. I actually dreaded exploring a few areas because of the creep factor in these areas. Now, I know I just pointed out multiple ways these two games are vastly different from each other, but the most impressive feat is how the developers made both games feel cohesive despite their differences. I know earlier I recommended playing the prequel first, and I still stand by that. But I would like to point out that the original game, Descend into Madness, goes on sale quite often and as cheap as $4, depending on your preferred system. So if you're wanting to try the series but you aren't quite sure if you want to spend $20 for the new title, you could get Descend into Madness on sale to see if you want to play both games. There is also an option to buy the games bundled together. For some reason, it's unavailable right now, but it's showing it'll cost anywhere between $20 to $24 for the bundle depending on the system you're buying the games on. If you think you'll enjoy the series, that is a very good deal for two fantastic horror games. Overall, I enjoyed both games and think they're worth playing, especially if you're into story-driven horror games like I am. I think I enjoyed Descend into Madness more between the two, since I enjoyed the setting, characters, and more variety in the gameplay more. But again, I think they're both worth playing. Let me know down in the comments below if you plan on giving these games a try. If you enjoyed this content, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It's a huge help for small channels like mine. Until next time, take care, mates.